In this video, I'm going to show you how to make your tests data-driven using JSON files. Welcome to automateNow. I'm Marco Cruz. Let's dive in. And in this video that I made a little while ago, I explained how to put data into a JSON file and then run a test that reads that data. But in that example, it was a single set of data, meaning that the test only had one set of data to work with. And this viewer here is asking how to provide different sets of data. So when your test runs, it runs with multiple sets of data. And this is what we're going to talk about in this video. And this right here is the automateNow.io website. And here we have this page called Sandbox. And this page is full of things that you can automate. One of them is this form fields. Let's click on this. And here we have this form. We're going to be creating a test that is going to fill out this form with different sets of data. The first time that it runs, we're going to provide one set of data. And when the test runs the second time, it's going to provide a different set of data. So it is going to be filling out this form with different sets of data each time that the test runs. Let's see how we're going to do that. And the library that we're going to be using is called JSON Simple. So we're going to need to add this dependency to our POM file right here. And to get this dependency, you need to head over to mvnrepository.com and then search for JSON Simple. Then you can click on this first result right here. As of the date of recording, here's the latest version. We click on that, and this is the dependency that we need to add to our POM file. I already went ahead and did that. So next we're going to start writing our test. And the next thing that we're going to do is to create a JSON file that is going to contain the test data. And here I have a resources folder, and I already have a JSON file here. This is the one I used in the first video. Notice that this only has one set of data. We're going to create a new file in here. So let's right click this folder. I'm going to say new and then file. And here we're going to call this test data2.json. And here's the data that this file is going to contain. As you can see, this is a JSON object. And this JSON object contains an array. It's indicated by this open bracket right here and a closed bracket. This is called an array. This array has two elements. So this is the first element right here, and the next element is this one right here. So this will be our first set of data for the test, and this will be the second set of data. Notice that we have here different fields. It says form field, checkbox, radio button. All of this information is coming from the website. This form right here. Here we see form fields, and we have checkboxes, radio buttons, and so on and so forth. This is all the data. So now we're going to create a data provider that is going to read this data so that it can be used in our tests. And over here, I have this package called utils. In that package, we have this class called DataUtil. Let's go ahead and open that class. And this already has a data provider in here. We're going to be creating a new data provider. So we're going to type data provider. Then we say public. This needs to return an object array. So we're going to say object and then array. Let's call this one data provider 2. And here we have the data that we want to read. So let's see how we're going to read it. First, we need to create a JSON parser to parse that data. So we're going to say JSON parser, and this comes from the JSON Simple package. We'll call this parser. It's equal to new JSON parser. We're also going to need a JSON object. So we're going to say JSON object. Let's call it JSON object here. It's equal to, and for now we're going to set this to null. Then we're going to read the JSON file. And here we're going to say object. This is just a Java object that we need here. Is equal to parser.parse. And this is how we're going to read the data from this file over here, the test data2.json. So we need a file reader. So we're going to say new file reader. And now we need the path for this file here. So let's go to our project here, and we can right click on this file, and then we can select copy path reference. And then we select path from content root. Then we can paste that information in here in quotes. So this is the path for our file. Next, we're going to say JSON object. It's equal to object. So we're going to grab the information that we get from this file and put it into a JSON object. and we need to cast this Java object into a JSON object. So let's go ahead and do that. And here we have an error due to an unhandled exception. So let's go ahead and surround this with try and catch. And next, we're going to need to extract the array data from the JSON object. Recall that this is an array. This array contains two objects, so we need to extract this array information. So to do that, first we're going to make sure that the JSON object is not null. Then we need to create a JSON array object. Let's call this one form info. It's equal to, and here we say JSON object dot get, and what we need to get from this object over here is this right here. This is the object that we want to get, this form info. So we're going to put that information in here. So we're going to grab this and paste it in here. And we're going to need to cast this JSON object into a JSON array type. So let's go ahead and do that. In order for our test to be able to use this array information, we need to put it into a Java type of array, not a JSON array. So here we're going to say a string array to store JSON array data. So let's go ahead and create a string array, call it data array is equal to new string array, and the size of this array is going to be whatever the size of the JSON array is. So here we can say form info dot size. So whatever the size of this array is here, that's what the size of this array is going to be. Next, we're going to create some strings, and these strings are going to contain this information line by line over here. So we're going to say input field, then checkbox, radio button, drop down, email, and message. All these strings represent all of this data right here. We have an input field, checkbox, radio button, and so on. I also need my JSON object here, so let me go ahead and add it. I'm going to call this one form info data. We're going to see how we're going to use this one in a second. So next, we're going to get the data from the JSON array and store it into the string array. So whatever data we get here, we're going to put it into this array here. And for that, we need to create a for loop. I less than form info dot size. And this is because we want to traverse through this array. We want to be able to grab each one of these items, this one and then this one here. Then we say I++. Here we're going to say form info data, it's equal to form info dot get I. So this is going to retrieve the first object right here in this array, and we need to cast this into a JSON object. Then we're going to start putting each one of these items in here into these strings over here. So here I'm going to say input field equal to form info data dot get, and here I need to provide what I want to get. I want to grab the first item right here, so which is the input field. So let's go ahead and copy this and put it here. And we also need to cast this into a string. We need to do that for the rest of the items, so let me go ahead and do that here. Once that is all set, now we need to put all the strings into the array that we created up here. So here we're going to say data array at I is equal to input field, and we're going to separate the strings using commas. And later when we're writing the test, I'm going to explain why we use commas here. Then we need to return this array. So here we're going to say return data array. And before we move on, let's go ahead and do a quick review of what we're doing here. Well, first let me get rid of this here. I don't really need to set this to null. So first, we're going to see that we're creating a JSON parser object right here, because we need to parse this JSON data that we have over here in this file. That's why we're creating this object. We also need a JSON object to store the parsed data. Then we go down to read the JSON file. And here we create a Java object. We're going to use this Java object to store the parsed data. This line right here will read this data from this JSON file and store it in this Java object. In this line over here, we're taking the data that we read and we're storing it into a JSON object over here. We must do this in order to be able to work with the data. Now over here, we're going to extract the array data from that JSON object. Because recall that this is a JSON object right here. But this object contains an array. This is the array. The array contains two elements. This one, and here's another. So over here, we're creating this JSON array to be able to work with this array over here on the right. And we're saying JSON object that get form info. Form info is the name of this array. Here's the form info. So we're going to grab this array information and put it in this JSON array. Our test is now going to be able to work with this JSON array, and that is the reason why we're creating a Java string array. The size of this array is being set to the size of this JSON array. Down here, we're going to create a new JSON object. We're calling this one form info data. We're going to use this object to retrieve each set of data inside of this array. We also see that the first element in this array contains different fields. We have an input field, checkbox, radio button, and so on and so on. And that's why we're creating different strings to be able to store that information into these strings. These strings are the ones that are going to go into this string array over here. Now down here in this for loop, we're going to retrieve the data from the JSON array and store it into the string array. And this first line right here is going to grab all of this information right here, the first item from this array, and it's going to put that into this form info data JSON object. Once we have that information, we're going to go item by item and put that into the strings. So here we're saying form info data that get input field. This is going to retrieve this information right here. It's going to retrieve hello. We're looking at this item, input field, and we're getting the information called hello. And we're storing that into this string called input field. Then we go to the next item. We grab the information located at checkbox, which is this right here. This contains the number 1. We're going to store the number 1 into this item right here called checkbox. And we do that for every single item down the list. Once we've got all that information, we're going to go to the first item in this string array. We're going to store all of the information in there, and we're going to separate it using commas. So the first time that this loop runs, it's going to grab all of these items right here and put them into these strings right here, and then store that information into the array. So the first item in this array over here is going to contain this information right here. When the loop runs a second time, it's going to grab this data down here, and that is going to go into the second item in this array. So this array right here will contain two elements. In the first element, it will have this data. In the second element, it will have this data. Then we're returning this array so that it can be used by our test. And now we're ready to start writing our test. So let's go to this sandbox test class. And here we have a new test called submit form. So let's go ahead and add a quick description to this test right here. Then we need to add the data provider information. And here we're going to say data provider class, it's equal to data util.class. Because our data provider is located in this data util class right here. Then we say comma data provider, and then we need to give the name of our data provider. So let's go back here. The name of our data provider is this one right here, data provider 2. So let's grab this name and put it over here. So this data provider right here is going to provide our data. Now we need a way to receive that data. So in here, in this method parameters, we're going to say string data, because our data is going to come in the form of a string. And here in the method's body, we're going to say string array Let's call it form info is equal to data dot split. And we're going to split the data at the comma. Let's go back to our data provider. Recall that when we store the data into this array over here, we're separating the data using commas. So the first element in that array is going to say hello, comma, 1, comma, white, comma, binary, and so on. The second item is going to say hello again, comma, 3, comma, blue, and so on. Let's go back to the test. And here we have created a new array. This array right here is going to contain this information over here when the test runs the first time. When it runs the second time, it's going to contain this information right here. So just to be clear, this test is going to run twice. First, it's going to run with this set of data right here, and then it's going to run with this set of data. And this is what it's going to look like the first time that it runs. This is the first time. It's going to contain all of these items right here in this array. At the first element, we're going to say hello, then 1, then white, and this is this information right here. Hello, 1, white, and so on. On the second pass, this array will now contain this information over here, which is coming from the second element over here in this array. Then we're going to say driver.get, and we're going to navigate to our website. This is the URL right here. And then we say form fields page, form fields is equal to sandbox page dot click form fields. And all this means is that I already have a page object for this form fields page. This page right here, form fields. When we click on this page is the form fields page. And this is the page object for that page. So in this line right here, we're going to go to the sandbox page, and then we're going to click form fields. So when we get to this page right here, we click on this button that says form fields. And then we get this form fields page. I already have a page object for that page, which is this one right here, form fields page, as you can see here. And this class already has different methods for locating all the elements and inputting text into those elements. Then I'm going to say form fields dot set input field text. So here we're going to set this field right here, input field. Then we're going to go down the list to set a checkbox, set a rater button, a drop down, all the way down the list until we click submit button. And recall that our array is going to contain this data right here. So we need to grab, for that field, we need to grab this first item in that array. So here we're going to say form info at 0, because this is item number 0 in this array. Then we're going to go to the next item and set select checkbox, and here we say form info item number 1, and that would be this item right here. Let's go ahead and do the rest. Once we've done all this, we're going to say .click submit to click on the submit button. So this code right here is going to be in charge of filling out our form and then clicking the submit button. Let's go back to the website for a second. So let's go ahead and fill out some fields in here. When we click submit, we're going to get this message right here, which says message sent. So we need to verify this message. Let's go ahead and add an assertion for this. Here we're going to say string confirmation message is equal to form fields dot get confirmation message. I already have a method that grabs that message right here. It just grabs that text. It says message sent. And then we're going to assert that this confirmation message contains message sent. So our test is finished. And as I said before, when this test runs, it's going to run twice. First, it is going to run with this set of data. The second time it runs, it's going to grab this data right here. And I expect the first test to pass and the second test to fail. The reason why is because I provided some invalid data in this email right here. Let's go back to the form for a second. And notice that if we have some invalid data right here in this email field, and we try to submit this form, we won't be able to submit this form because it says we need to provide a valid email address in this field. So this test will fail because we'll never get the confirmation message that the form was submitted successfully. So now we're ready to run this test. Let's go ahead and run it. And notice the test results right here. We see that the first attempt, it passed. In the second attempt, it failed. And the reason why it failed is because it failed to get the confirmation message. I really hope you enjoyed this video. You can head over to github.com/automateNow. There you're going to find this repo called Intermediate WebDriver. This repo will contain the code that I used today. You can also check out some of these other repos. Thanks so much for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe and like. I'll see you in the next video.